This is an experiment in writing and place. I call it a chorography because it signals a particular mode of engagement, an intensification aimed at something between description and explanation. 1. As Rimbaud figured it, skies the gray of crystal, a strange design of bridges, some straight, some arched, others descending at oblique angles to the first, and these figures recurring in other lighted circuits of the canal, but all so long and light that the banks, laden with domes, sink and shrink. A few of these bridges are still covered with hovels, others support poles, signals, frail parapets. Minor chords cross each other and disappear. Ropes rise from the shore. One could make out a red coat, possibly other costumes and musical instruments. Are these popular tunes, snatches of seignorial concerts, remnants of public hymns? The water is gray and blue and wide as an arm of the sea. A white ray falling high from in the sky destroys this comedy. 2. To begin with, imagine that you and I were standing together on the Footbridge at Atwater Market. Rimbaud's cinematic prose could seem to us an invitation, perhaps invocation of sorts, a whimsical if impressionistic checklist just for us. Canal, obviously. Minor chords, yes, in a sense. Hovels, some remaining. Frail parapets, most certainly. Public hymns, of course. And a sky the gray of crystal. But this isn't exactly about us. 3. The bridge is known as the Atwater Bridge, a footbridge possessed of no inspiration, no special attributes. It merely cuts a low arc across the canal, joining one side with the other. This is the bridge without qualities. 4. None, really, and certainly nothing of technical, historical, or aesthetic distinction. No pleasurable Baroque cantilevers, no clockwork turntables, telling, perhaps. No stonework, no appointments, as they say. Again, tellingly, it has no itinerary. It is vaguely bureaucratic-looking, incongruous in relation to the lovely Deco-inspired market, instrumental, one might say. That is, it does the job, if we understand the calling of the bridge in a certain functional fashion, drawing on the paradigm of possible bridges, quite without recourse to anything we might call a gesture of art. It is, after all, only a footbridge, merely a portage for les coureurs de baguette, travelers, traders, and tourists, to and from the market at Atwater. Nice view from up here, though. 5. Of course, we must remember that this is a bridge over the Lachine Canal, though moving as we do, we sometimes forget. Part sewer, part trench, part recreational corridor, part territorial archive. It cuts a topographic swath through the lower part of the island of Montreal, through its deep and sedimented history. For the Europeans, a Western itinerary, a topographic error, Lachine, the Orient. Never mind, they weren't the first. It's always a cycle of possession and dispossession. 6. Between the mid-19th and 20th century, this long line, this route, was the most intensively industrialized region in Canada, a huge economic engine for the region and the nation, a cradle, as it was and is ceaselessly called, of the economy, of industry, of nation, of anything nascent and valuable. And it would be still if the opening of the St. Lawrence Seaway hadn't set in motion the canal's transformation to anachronism with the very first flush of its locks in 1959. 7. By 1965, the eastern end of the canal near the old port was closed and filled, leaving only ship access from the Lac Saint-Louis end. A Lachine canal with only one opening is not really a canal, a cul-de-sac. In 1969, the St. Lawrence Seaway Authority announced the permanent closure of the Lachine Canal, rendering the site of nearly a century and a half of continued investment, development, expansion, and transformation, a landlocked artifact and archive. 8. It wasn't a quiet transformation. The hydraulic force in suspension created a different kind of turbulence. The remaining industries along the corridor attempted to contest the closure and potential filling of the canal, arguing their continued need for water, waste disposal, and at least partial navigability. Nonetheless, in 1970, the canal came to an end, a post-industrial oxbow, vestigial, obsolete. Neighborhoods that had been socially, economically, and geographically formed by the canal over the course of its history were suddenly landlocked, towns with no cheer. 9. But here it is, naked, curious, a murky fact. And if you were to ask, what is the Lachine Canal of that most contemporary of oracles, Google, we would learn many things about this urban route. For instance, where I get my daily dose of weather and trees, once a humming artery of shipping and located in a heavily used urban park where one does not expect, we are not sure what not to expect. Part of Parks Canada historic sites. The Lachine Canal stretches 14.5 kilometers from the Old Port to Lac Saint-Louis, a key part of Montreal's past as a shipping and industrial centre. Hard to imagine that placid little Lachine Canal used to be interior Canada's sole artery to the Atlantic. Indeed it is. Ideal for activities that are as cultural and historical as they are sportive and recreational. Having fun? Due to a clearance of 8 feet under the Canadian National Railway, designed for vessels with a clearance of 8 feet, opened from May 14th to October 14th. Business owners on Montreal's Lachine Canal were told to close down Tuesday after the city was forced to dump raw sewage into the canal to avoid sewer backups during Monday's heavy rainfall. History is the site of the now. Full of human patterns, the oldest canal in Canada, a green wonderland of leafy elephants, my personal favorite. Opened after 5 years of construction, more severely contaminated, also scenic, finished, completed, full. Good riding, so I took my time and made it downtown just before dark. A storm was coming, so we docked at Atwater Market. The storm is what we call progress. Note that there may not be an opera, always a risk, and so on. 10. Anyway, apart from its rich setting, its apparent indifference thereto, and its utter structural artlessness, it is, like most of the bridges over the length of the Lachine Canal, an abridgment of the work of the canal itself. That is to say, to have a canal, the Lachine or otherwise, mustn't one also have at least the very idea of a bridge to cross it? The invisibility of our tools, bridges, search engines, and otherwise, testifies to their embeddedness in our thinking and speaking. 11. No need to be overly metaphorical here. After all, the bridge is already performing in the service of metaphor. It can hardly do otherwise, to carry over, to bear, to transfer. That said, this is not the bridge as a symbol of fraternity, as a reaching out and holding together across the waters, the communicative bridge. The metaphorical bridge is freighted with travelers and tropes stretching back into antiquity. The point here is different, and is simply this: the hydrotechnics of the canal, connecting two distant bodies of water by drawing a line deep into the earth. This is unthinkable without a parallel technology of the bridge. Together they form a practice or circuit. The canal presupposes the bridge, just as the bridge presupposes something for it to purposefully cross over. 12. Indeed, when legislation was enacted to allow the construction of the Lachine Canal, it specified that where the canal severed a public road, which it did at numerous points along its alignment, within a period of 1 month, a new bridge was to be built. 13. When you think of it, this is a long time to sever a road, and a very short time to build a bridge. Nevertheless. 14. When the canal was twice widened in the middle of the 19th century, some 14 bridges had to be rebuilt, basically 1 per kilometer of canal. Some of these constructions were impressive structures indeed, drawing from the leading edge of design and technology, and most were the result of the renowned Dominion Bridge Company, the Guaran, the Besanger, Charleroi. 15. Today the canal is crossed by some 25 bridges and structures, a number of railways, and the improbable and crumbling aerial catastrophe of ramps and overpasses linking together 3 expressways in airborne symmetry, conventionally known as the Turcotte Interchange. Crossing beneath it are 2 tunnels, 2 metro lines, a clutch of conduits together with hydro, telephone, and gas lines. 16. Throughout the 19th century, right up until the point in 1970 at which boats plied the canal no more, divers were employed periodically to remove objects that might prove dangerous to navigation. Stones, pieces of wood and metal, dross from construction, carts, carriages, and other cast-off debris, bodies, supposedly, who knows, but everything had to be located and removed. 17. Here, in the early 21st century, crossing the bridge at Atwater in winter, one can enumerate many such objects arrayed on the gray January ice. Remnants of public hymns, perhaps, an installation of debris, of signs, a shopping cart maquillage of frozen freshwater clams, the back of a Petula Clark CD, 1 tire, a small cross-country ski boot, a blue hat, a red scarf, and a mitten that may have been brown. Many such objects not easily identifiable. No stray dogs, no suckling pigs. A constellation of empty beer bottles, a bowling ball. Actually, that's not true. There was no bowling ball. That was a different bridge and a different canal and a very different time. 18. The scene in the summer months is starkly different. Amidst the fanfare of the 2002 official reopening of the canal, a veritable flotilla of pleasure boats took to the waters. This had not been part of the original plan proposed by Park Canada, nor of the environmental impact statement they undertook. But during the public consultation process, it became cast as a key issue for the success of the project. 19. The bridge today affords a kind of archaeological viewpoint. It is an irreducibly modern bridge, but it looks over something built up from layers and layers of history. It would be useful, suppose those engaged to think about the canal in this manner, to examine the stratigraphic context, to identify what seems to be a fire layer, to locate any trace of occupation. Such traces are everywhere, although the ongoing commoditization of the canal's historical built resources threatens to stage all of this as the second disappearance of the canal. The sediments, though, these are perhaps the only remaining in situ record. 20. Imagine, suggests Damakai, imagine a trail made of moments rather than minutes, wild bits of time which resist elapsing according to a schedule, pauses, each one bell-shaped, into which you step as an applicant for the position of tongue. To imagine this is to arrest one flow in order to see another, a landscape. It is to think of the archive as a territorial proposition. It is to understand something of the relations between a route and a place. A place, we might say, in addition to its occupation and identifications, is constituted by everything in a somewhere that if removed or destroyed would diminish it. But a route is a foil, that is a track, a mark, a line, and it is a concealment, the effacement of the line. One can follow a foil, sometimes with ease, sometimes not. 21. Standing on the footbridge now, or at any time at all, we would be roughly midway along what is prosaically called Basin Number 3 of the Lachine Canal. The language of the lockmaster is always used to describe this place. Anyway, this was a difficult basin during the cleanup phase of the canal redevelopment, not that there was much of a cleanup undertaken. The worst was Basin Number 4. There were bikes and mattresses, furniture and picnic tables, and so many cars that it would have been impossible for a boat to cross it. 22. Apart from the contaminated sediments and the various and sundry objects that find their way into the murky shallows, the other vector of contamination, infrequently cited in official documents, concerns bacteriological contamination. Several times a year, according purely to rainfall intensity, wastewater and household sewage is diverted through the Rockfield overflow outlet directly into the Lachine Canal. It seems that no one is quite sure how many active discharge points there are along the length of the canal. Parks Canada estimated over 200 drains and intakes exist, some active, some not, some legal, others not. 23. One must resist the idea that the basins of the canal are somehow interconnected lakes communicating via locks. This could not be further from the truth. The Atwater Bridge overlooks the real secret of the canal today. It is a river in slow motion, a post-industrial river. 24. From Lachine to the Old Port, the canal drops over 5 meters. In other words, the water one sees in calm reflection, yours or its, is moving. From the vantage point of our bridge at Atwater, the water falls. Hardly a torrent, but it falls. And it falls at something on the order of 6 centimeters per second. That's a little over 5 kilometers a day. Think of it. The water flowing past the Fur Trade Museum in Lachine this morning will pass under the Atwater Bridge tomorrow afternoon and will flow into the Old Port the day after that, down to the sea. 25. Yet our inventory here is hardly complete. Beneath the bridge lies the water. It is a river, after all. 26. In the water here, beneath the bridge, the river with its tributaries supports life. A lot, actually. One can find such denizens of the not-so-deep as pelecypods and oligochaetes, and fish, I've seen them, chromatic fish like emerald shiners and yellow perch, some 16 species in all. I have often seen intrepid urban fishers casting their lines. In the sediments below the bridge, copper, chromium, lead, zinc, and particularly mercury, all exceed provincial guidelines. Traces, to be sure, of the serial history of production along this route: pulp and paper, iron, rubber, leather, textile, beverages, steel, printing, non-ferrous metals, electrical appliances, petroleum, coal, industrial chemicals, flour, nails, sugar, non-metallic ores, and so on. History here is not just built, it is contained in the stratigraphic record of the canal sediments. The challenge is to think all of this history in the now. 27. Today, in the Directory of Federal Real Property, managed by the Treasury Board of Canada, the Lachine Canal is home to a number of contaminated sites. It is, of course, not possible to tell with any real precision where these 32 individual sites might be, nor the precise extent of the contamination. Each of these contaminated sites, however, indicate the presence of heavy metals and organic compounds, petroleum hydrocarbons, polychlorinated biphenols, and the wondrously synesthetic polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. Quips Rambo. It ends in a riot of perfumes. 28. In any case, even from this vantage point atop the Atwater Bridge, the very concept of contamination remains ambiguous. What would count exactly? By contaminated site is generally meant a site at which substances occur at concentrations 1 above background levels and are likely to pose an immediate or long-term hazard to human health or the environment, or 2, exceeding levels specified in policies and regulations. 29. That is, either dangerous or illegal or both. This, one might add, mimics perfectly the structural form of the alibi. 30. Contaminated sites, toxicological or juridical, brownfields, as they are sometimes called, a former industrial or commercial site where future usage is affected by either real or perceived environmental contamination. Full fathom 5. 31. Were this a piece of music, a composition of sounds, with which it is certainly filled, a quolibet, let's say, though perhaps more in the archaic sense of a pleasing topic than a medley, we might think of the canal as a very long line, a rhythmic line in extension, and we could also imagine, not a hard thing to do, that this line had a thickness, a depth, say, a harmonic depth. That would be something to think about. It would be a very complicated place, a place that would require a very special mode of engagement, a mode of theory that retro-navigates an idea of place as inseparable from experience. In a word, theoria. 32. And then we would have something very special indeed, a remarkable line that we will call a root or a watery foil, with the thickness and extension, or better, an amplitude and a frequency, the waves of the root falling down through the canal to the sea. We would have a strange and wonderful polyphony of industry and water and history and time and progress and struggle and change. And the lives of men and women, of runners and riders and boats with Bob Seeger, of immigrants and owners, lockmasters and shipbuilders, and styrofoam water lilies, unstable objects for sure. And steersmen, stonecutters, masons and machines, ironworkers, pipe fitters, dog walkers, and those without homes, all of these things would be there as they are there, here, traces of them at least. And of course the contamination, each of the 32 sites about which we know so little, yet each subsists, each perfectly real wherever they are. And then we think of the bridge from which we survey this strange cacophony, and there we are, an encounter by chance, by accident.